Hi, this is going to be a quick masterclass on documentary interviews. I've done quite a few of these videos in the past, but what's unique about this one, besides that this is the best information possible, I hope, is that we have a PDF down below that will give you a starting place for your questions. It's a guide for you to know where to start so that you don't get stuck recording interviews that aren't really helping your film, because there's nothing worse than when you come back to the interview and you look at it and say, well, this ain't helping. First tip is get someone taking notes, if possible. There's a great website, not sponsored by them, editingtools.io/livetools. It's a free website. You can go in there and take notes during your interview so that you can then export out an XML and send it to your editor or yourself so that you just know the good parts of your interview. It's a great tool to have even when you're just shooting B-roll on set. Next tip is know the power of what. You can actually get some pretty underwhelming questions when you just ask someone, what happened on this day? But if you just change what you're asking for with the word what, you can get much more interesting questions like, what was going through your head? What were you feeling in that precise moment? What are your goals? What do you think will happen if you don't reach your goal? Using that what question to get people thinking about their emotions and their goals and what they're actually feeling will get you much more interesting questions. My next point is know the difference between emotion and information questions. I've mentioned this many times on this channel, but I still see people making this mistake in their interviews where they ask just information questions, getting people to talk about what happened, where they were, how old they were, all the minutiae and details of those said events or their expertise, but forgetting to ask them about the emotions. What was that like for you? How would you describe what that time was like for you personally? What was your family feeling? What were you feeling? What were you thinking? What were you thinking? So you can actually just go through your list of questions and write E or I, emotion or information. And if you have a lot of I's beside your questions, it might be time to ask some more emotive questions. My next point is practice flow for an interview. I've said this before, write your questions, then throw them out. You don't need to throw them out, but have them as a reference, but flow your questions together. This is the power of listening. I think the biggest mistake for most people in interviews is that they're not actually listening to what people are saying. We had Ben Proudfoot on one of our AOD calls. Every month we bring in experts from around the industry for the Art of Documentary Academy. And Ben Proudfoot has won 2 Academy Awards, and he's an incredible interviewer. You look at his film, The Last Repair Shop, and he actually doesn't go off of a notepad. He will just get into his interviews, and sometimes they take 8 hours. He just did an interview that took 3 days, so that's pretty big. But for you, you might just have an hour with someone, but that's still okay for you to just get into a flow. And what I mean by that is don't just be looking at each question and looking back up. That's just not how conversations go in real life, and you want people to forget that they're being interviewed. So listen to them. Rather than sometimes just having a list of questions, know that a list of plot points in that person's life or a list of ideas you'd like them to talk about. So if you're asking an athlete about when was the first time you played basketball and they say, oh, I think I was a kid when I was 7 years old. Don't look down to your notes and come up with the next question. Ask them, what was that moment like? Do you remember it? Do you remember the first time holding that ball? These will begin to get into themes, and then you're gonna get into that flow, and this is when the best parts of the interview will come through, when someone forgets that they're being interviewed with a camera there. My next point is leave 10 minutes before your interview just to hang out with the person. Even if you've done a pre-interview, it's nice to let someone's nerves calm down. And don't talk about yourself. Ask lots of questions, even in this opening moment. I love just giving some space and time for my subjects to land. Like we just did this interview with Chris Williamson, and I've mentioned it. It was so hot outside. He came in, he had to take his shirt off. So we just hung around for 10 minutes and we chatted. And he's way more fit than me. So I was asking him about his exercise and about how his podcast is going. Get people forgetting that they're on a film set. Let them feel comfortable in that environment. If you listen to podcasts like Joe Rogan, he's always referencing back to conversations he had with the guest when they first arrived. It's very clear that he talks with them ahead of time before they ever sit down in the seat. So get interested in them, which leads me to my next point, is research who your person is to death, whether that's in pre-interviews or talking to their family or just getting into any information online about them so that the questions you ask will help them feel known. I've made this mistake so often where I'll go in just a bit arrogant into interviews and just think, well, I'm good at talking, I'm good at asking questions, I don't need to know a ton about this person. And I'll end up up putting my foot in my mouth. I'll ask them questions or inquire about things that should be so obvious about their life, and it makes them feel like perhaps I don't know much about them. That's not a great feeling to have. I think the best person at this in the world is Nardwuar. He does so much research ahead of time, and you'll see how he gets unique reactions out of guests like Questlove crying that he would never get out of anyone else.
Up in Townsend, right? This dude right here is really doing his research though. This guy.
So study your person. Take that extra hour or few hours the days ahead of time to get to know who they are. One of the key parts to me coming up with the questions for my films is also immersing myself in what I believe will be the cinematic universe of that actual film. And you've probably heard me mention this in the past on this channel, but listening to the right music helps me get into that mindset and begin to envision those scenes and pictures and moments that will play out in the film. So coming up with some of my questions, one of my favorite things to do is to go into Musicbed. I either go to one of my playlists I have for the art of documentary or my personal one, or I go find their new music and I make sure to categorize it by cinematic and instrumental so that I'm not distracted by any voices. And then this helps inform what I want to actually ask my character, what questions might provoke some of those scenes. And I've found that Musicbed has by far the best library for this. It's made by film composers. A lot of the music has been taken from films. So many of my documentaries have their music featured right on Musicbed, and I've worked with many of these composers. Musicbed even now has an AI tool where if there's a song that you like from a certain movie or genre or band, you can type that in and it'll suggest music that is similar to this. I've put a link below down to a free trial for Musicbed and also a link to one of my playlists if you want to check out the music that I've been using lately. Check out Musicbed. Appreciate them for sponsoring this video. By the way, if you want to see the whole lighting breakdown and how we go about shooting more high-end interview setups, I did a breakdown of this interview we did with Chris Williamson with DP Chris Bork. And a quick little mention to Art of Documentary. That's the course and academy that I helped co-found. It's an incredible community of thousands of filmmakers around the world. We have whole sections in our courses that talk about documentary interviews, about how to improve your storytelling, how to run your business better. But we're going to be reopening the doors really soon. Check out AOD. I'll put the link below if you're interested, or shoot me a DM if you want to find out more. Another point, never tell someone to be comfortable.
Come on, Yolanda, what's Fonzie like?
Cool.
The second you tell someone, hey, just relax, be normal, when you're shooting B-roll or putting them in an interview setting, it's just a strange thing to ask because then people start getting in their head thinking, well, what is normal? Am I acting normal? And it puts pressure on them to feel like they just weren't acting normal. Get that out of your vocabulary. Your job is to create an environment that will help them feel relaxed and to talk to them and ask them questions to get their mind off the fact that they're being filmed or that there's any pressure in the interview. My last few points is always circle back to your first few questions at the end of the interview. This is a great way if people were a bit more reserved, a bit more tense at the beginning, to come back to those questions and ask them again, because by then they may give you more genuine, honest responses or actually rephrase them or reframe them in a way that you didn't have before. They'll be more relaxed. Bonus tip, never interrupt. Let someone finish their thought. Sometimes people like me, we need to just hear ourselves talk for us to actually sort out our thoughts. And perhaps you don't feel what they're saying is that important, but that is important for the person to actually sort out what they're thinking and feeling. And when you interrupt, you're telling them that's not important. Just be patient, let them get through that idea, and then ask them to maybe perhaps summarize what they just said. What is the key point? This will help you get truncated responses, which can be really helpful for the edit. And lastly, if you can, have someone else monitoring the questions that you wrote down so that you can stay focused and stay present in the interview. I love working with my producer, Tad, on the projects we've been working on recently. For the Chris Williamson interview, he was hiding behind the monitor. He had all the questions we've written out. We probably had 100 questions. We didn't have to ask all of them, but we had them connected to the themes that we were trying to find out for our film, because Chris was talking about a main character we're going to be working on. This whole interview we shot with Chris is for an upcoming documentary series we're working on. Having that script supervisor, having that writer, having that extra person in the room to help you is really, really helpful. So I recommend having one other person there on set who knows your story or at least is reviewing all your questions. Awesome, thank you for watching this video. I hate goodbyes, but I love my whoop. I love finding out how much I slept last night. Actually, let's check. I'm not sponsored by Whoop, nice. That was actually pretty good. I'll take it. 85% recovery. Maybe I should go for a run tonight. All right, see you guys on the next one.